Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I'm going to ask folks if just for now, if you could turn your cameras off unless you're one of the panelists, and then we're going to have a little bit. We'll have folks pop back on later if you have questions or like to engage with the panel. But it's a little tricky if a lot of cameras are on. But first off, thank you so much for joining today's webinar, The Good, the Bad, and Why It Might Be the Best Career You Ever Had of Publishing. My name is Andrew Bosch-Jancic. I am the Senior Policy and External Affairs Manager at Taylor & Francis, and I will be your moderator for today's panel discussion. We have a wonderful set of speakers today that will provide their stories and perspectives on their careers in academic publishing. So I'll do the top of the order housekeeping bit first. We are currently recording today's webinar. I have a series of prepared questions that will guide our conversation today, and then we will throw it to the audience for any questions you may have with about 15 minutes to go. So now I'm going to have the panelists take a moment to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your organization and your current role within that organization. Jessica, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jessica Carter. I'm the publishing assistant at University of Toronto Press. I handle ebook distribution, contract processing and royalty support, and metadata mainly. Um, yeah, so that's me. University of Toronto Press is a non-for-profit university press, one of the largest in Canada, and we have close affiliations with the University of Toronto, but are actually separate from them, which is a different thing than most university presses. Yeah, thanks.
Jocelyn?
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Paggio. I am the Senior Books Acquisitions Editor for Elsevier, citing in translational neuroscience and psychology. I've been with Elsevier for about 17 years now, for both journals and books. So I kind of have a unique perspective in terms of both sides of publishing. With Elsevier, I work in the research reference side. So we do mostly research books and also translational research books into clinical practice.
And John?
Hi, everybody. I'm John Warren. I'm a director and associate professor in the graduate program in publishing at George Washington University, and been director for almost 6 years and have taught part-time before that for 5 years. And most of my background has been in academic publishing, but I started out in Spanish language publishing, worked in research publishing at the RAND Corporation, and started a small university press at George Mason from scratch, which was fun. And now again, directing the GW program. So thanks for having me here.
So I think one of the kind of big questions that is kind of the start of your journey. So how did you get into the publishing industry? And then what led you to pursue a career within an STM publisher versus a trade publisher versus going on the university side with the program? So I'll kind of leave that to anyone that wants to jump in first for our panelists.
I can start. I actually started in periodicals, so writing editorials and things like that for a local publisher in Southern California. And then, with an English lit degree, I either had choices to go to law school, go to teaching, or go advance my education into a PhD or master's program. And I think I needed a break from going to school. I mean, all of us kind of need a break. And so I took a break and got a job at the university and worked directly with the chair. And she was working on publishing. She was working on a book and kind of going through all the editing and everything. And she asked me to help her because I had that experience in writing periodicals. And so after that, kind of got my hand into it and realized that this is something kind of fascinating, not only understanding publishing, but also, journals, how to submit and, everything that kind of went along with it. And so found Elsevier and decided to apply, and then started my career in journals as a journal manager and worked my way up to book publishing.
I guess I could go next. I I've always loved books and reading, so even from a young age, I was like, publishing or bust. So in Canada, there's a few publishing programs in Toronto. I kind of worked my way there. I did undergrad in English Lit, and then I did a master's in public texts at Trent University, and they have a connection to the Humber Creative Book Publishing Program. So I kind of did my master's, then the publishing program, and got a publishing certificate. And then from there, I did an internship at a small independent publisher in Toronto, Cormorant Books. They do just Canadian lit. And then from there, I got a job at a kind of off the beat publisher. They're called Telegraph Road, and they do children's educational workbooks and activity books. So that was a really interesting way to sort of like first step into like academic publishing, but for elementary school kids. And then, looking for a challenge, looking to grow. Job opened up at University of Toronto Press, and I thought that would be a great job to have. So I applied. It's been interesting because my job is not editorial, so it's been fascinating to see all the behind the scenes parts of publishing that maybe people don't think about when they think publishing, but still getting to be, surrounded by books and ideas. So that was sort of my path.
So one thing I see is that a lot of younger people are being very intentional about publishing careers, just like Jessica here mentions, like publishing or bust, like that. Most people I know, kind of my generation, fell into it accidentally. And in my case, I had no intention at all of going into publishing. I had done my graduate work was in international management at UC San Diego, and I was doing consulting after there was a recession going on, and I was helping people sell stuff in Mexico and Brazil and Argentina. And a Mexican publisher asked me to look at the US market for Spanish language books. And so it was really just a market research project. And then they asked me to do it. So it was very accidental, but I've of course enjoyed the career. So it's been an interesting ride. And I do see how in publishing there has really been a shift from this kind of apprenticeship model of just learning as you go to really trying to be more intentional and sort of create and develop best practices in publishing, including careers. So
Yeah, so I kind of fall in the same category. I was not looking for publishing. My background is in policy and government affairs work. So I typically deal with the federal government. I spend my career trying to work on policies that they're implementing, analyzing that. And I do that in my current role here at TNF. I help analyze policies from the federal government, give the business an idea of like what the impact of those policies might be. And then I work with elected officials and government officials to understand the policies that we would like to see and try to build a relationship with them and have a dialogue so that they can better understand the work that we do as academic publishers. Because I think that there's certainly a gap outside of our community where folks don't really get what we do. And it's something that I've been building my learning curve on for the last couple of years, but it's a very fascinating space to be in. But I kind of also come from that non-traditional publishing background as well. I'm really fascinated, and I'd love to know from folks, what does a typical day or week look like in your job? I feel like if folks could kind of see that, that'd be really helpful to kind of know, like, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like? It doesn't have to be a crazy day. It could be a normal day, or what you'd hope a normal day would be.
I guess I can go first. So normal day is including about at least 2 to 3 calls with authors or editors, kind of talking about either current authors talking about their books or new projects. So any new researchers or clinicians that are talking to me about different book projects. I'm just kind of understanding, and that's where I get a lot of firsthand knowledge about what they feel are gaps in the field, what they would like to see in books. And then a lot of emails, of course, email heavy nowadays. And then reviewing contracts. anywhere in my portfolio, I have about at least 100 books that are in development in different places, ranging from early on in development to in production, and then even post-production. And then there's filtering marketing emails and going through that. And then at the end of the day, it's usually my data work, because I'm on the West Coast, so everyone on the East Coast has already logged off. So I can actually focus on reports and data and looking at that and different trends. So it's kind of it's just a culmination of all of that together. I really do enjoy, my favorite part of the day is just chatting with people. I think it's the best part of my day to just talk with researchers, from, award-winning clinicians to down to very early on, postdocs who are just trying to understand publishing and, let me know what's going on in their field and their research. And really understanding how excited they are about their research. Some are really solving certain, diseases, and especially with my field, neurological diseases. So talking to a lot of neurologists and researchers in terms of brain and behavior. So that's quite interesting.
I guess we could go in the same order. Uh, my day has a lot less talking to people. Because I focus mostly on metadata, I do a lot of data entry. I'm assigning ISBNs, I'm putting, titles, author information, I'm maintaining author records, processing contracts, filing contracts in our data asset management system. We do have a couple weekly meetings, which is where I get all that fun, what the books are about, information, where they are in the process. But I'm also at those meetings doing things like recording changes in prices or discount codes or title updates, things like that. Yeah, so it's a lot of data entry, but it's also, you get to see the books across the press because you're the one putting it, like I'm the one putting all the information into our system. I also do the ebook distribution. So when we have ebooks to go out, I'm, getting the metadata together. I'm sending the files to our different vendors. I'm liaising with them if there's any issues, letting them know, hey, these books have come out to you. Let me know if there are problems with the files, managing any issues that might be happening behind the scenes. So yeah, the typical days are, a few meetings out through the week, but mostly, on my own time to focus. Nice to check in with coworkers here and there if I have, questions or just want to chat. It's a pretty great place, but yeah, a lot less phone calls.
I won't talk as much about the details of my day because it's probably not as relevant, but just, to pick up on what Jocelyn was saying, I think publishing is all about relationships. And, it's one of the things that I loved about the career in publishing is really meeting super interesting people all the time. So, in my particular role, I'm dealing a lot with students. I'm sometimes teaching, advising on careers, advising on the program, but also talking to a wide range of professionals about what's going on in the industry. I organize a conference every fall on ethics in publishing, but now I started doing another conference on student journals. So I'm just kind of, I guess, involved in a lot of things, but mostly, mostly, like I said, cultivating relationships. And I think that's a part of a lot of people's jobs that I know in publishing. And Jocelyn also mentioned a good point. I'll underscore it. Like, she might not have intentional, she might not have been intentional about going into like neuroscience, but it's still a really interesting thing. So a lot of people in publishing are working on fields that it might not be their, some, I don't know, like maybe you want to work on YA fiction, but you're editing, microbiology, but that's okay. You could still read YA fiction, even if it's not what you're, working on. So anyway, we could go to the next question, but
Yeah. Well, I think you've all kind of touched on an interesting piece here is the relationship aspect. So how do you find these relationships, either through a mentorships, like formalized relationships, or other relationships you're building with authors or students? Like, what is the kind of the process for that? Do you look for those things like events like this, or do you find it in more popping into meetings and just kind of building that informal rapport. So I'd be kind of curious how you built these kind of relationships over time and some of the things that you're doing when you're thinking about maybe getting into the career, like what would be the first kind of relationships you might want to look for?
I don't mind starting with this one, but I think it's a little bit of everything. Like you said, meetings like this, sometimes there's interaction, or you could reach out to somebody after, say, I saw you on this panel on LinkedIn. Conferences, we have Andrew and I were talking about the SSP conference coming up in Boston. It's not always possible for especially young professionals to travel. Some of these are virtual. I don't think you get as much interaction. I mean, a lot of the relationships that I have come from going to Book Expo America many years ago, or Tools of Change, or many different conferences. So I think if there's one in your area, even if you can't afford the admission, you can volunteer. Like SSP was looking for young professionals to volunteer in exchange for free admission. So there's ways to do it. But I think just knowing that networking is about developing relationships, and that means friendships, and they're like strategic partnerships, but friendships too.
Yeah, I agree definitely what John said. A lot of companies have various internships or mentorships. A lot of us in academic publishing, well, I deal with Elsevier. There's a number of us that volunteer with different mentorships programs. And so, I mean, partnering up with one of them that links to us, and you can definitely like select down. I know the president of our department has a group. I volunteer a few times a year when we're reached out. If someone reaches out to us, says, we have a couple people that are interested. And also, I agree with John, just reaching out to any of us on LinkedIn. I get a lot of pings about, questions about academic publishing, and what is different roles entail, and it's great to know a lot of the various roles now, from journals all the way to books. So there's a lot of variety, and I know, Andrew, you're in policy, but it's there, in different groups or different companies, there's not just publishing. There's a bunch of different avenues that you can go to that are linked to somewhat publishing, I mean, from policy to there's government relations, and in our company we have marketing. So we just, if you're just interested in just marketing and sales of books, so it's not just the focus of publishing, but there's different options available as well. And I think various companies will have those, mentorship programs as well.
Yeah, I agree. I guess a side note on this, when I did my publishing certificate program, it had a mentorship component, which was really great. They paired everyone in the program up with a working professional in publishing, and that was really great to see the people across, the industry in Toronto, people, in different roles, different maybe interests, but it sort of opens you up to what's out there. I agree, webinars like this are great. I've, watched quite a lot of these myself. Um, Also just, yeah, going to events, whether they're specifically like kind of conference events, or if they're even just normal book events. Toronto has what's called Word on the Street. It's a free um, like book festival basically, and it has a mix of academic publishers and trade publishers and booksellers, and just all about books, and you could go and talk to people. So if there's something like that in your area, that's always good just to go and see. Maybe you'll end up talking to a bookseller and decide you actually want to get into book selling. Maybe you'll end up talking to an editor there and decide that's sounds great. Maybe you'll listen to, maybe you'll want to get involved in the book festival itself. I think there's lots of routes for reaching out to people. And yeah, just reaching out. I've had one or two people reach out through LinkedIn and say, hey, can we chat? And I'm always happy to chat about my role, especially because, again, my role is a little bit niching sort of in the background. So people don't always know what's going on, behind the face of like editorial and marketing. So I am always happy to talk about a little bit of behind the scenes stuff. But yeah, I think there's lots of options like that. Looking for internships as well. Those are often great for just seeing what's out there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had a career coach who once gave me this really good piece of advice of telling me, look at a job that you want to get to at some point and go on their LinkedIn and see their career path and then like reach out to them and have an informational interview. There's, I'm used to working in the DC space where I do a lot of talking with staffers or folks in there, and I do so many informational interviews just to kind of learn somebody's process or learn about their journey because it's such a key component to understanding where you may want to take your career or and are there similar threads that you're seeing throughout various folks that are at the role that you want to get to in 5 years or 10 years. So it can be a really nice tool and a way to build authentic relationships with folks and really become, as John was saying, building friendships as well.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think a lot of people don't really understand the power of these kind of informational interviews. And these days, I think most people are open to half-hour Zoom meeting. If you can, if you're in the area, try to arrange coffee. I think there's nothing like face-to-face, but just the point of these meetings, if you're not familiar with the term, it's not to get a job, it's to find out more about the company, more about their role. I think if you go into them, set a goal of getting like 2 or 3 names of people to talk to, either at that company, and sort of have a list of companies that you're interested in and see if that person knows people there, things like that. But it's really exactly what it says, to get more information about the field and that role and that company and what the people are doing. Most people like talking about themselves.
Yeah. And you do get a vibe too. You can also figure out, maybe you talk to somebody and you say, oh, this organization may not jive with what I'm looking for, and maybe I want to go something bigger or smaller based on what my goals might be or the type of person that I am and people I like to work with, that might not be a fit or it might be a fit, and kind of help you do things that you might not pull out of an interview that you may have as well. So it is a nice tool to kind of really have the veneer of what an organization looks like kind of taken down, and you can really get into the nitty gritty. I do have a question for John that I'm curious about. So there's been a ton of emerging trends within academic publishing over the last few years, and I'm thinking like AI and some of these bigger ones. How are master's programs kind of adjusting to meet the needs of uh, of these meet the needs for students and professionals? Like, what are some of the ways that programs have been reevaluated, or courses are preparing students for kind of the world that we're kind of living in now or getting into?
Well, I could speak from my program, and I know directors at other programs too. I mean, we're always trying to be kind of, I guess there's this term like cutting edge, not bleeding edge. Like, we've always been very big on technology. We have a big focus on management and marketing. So it's not just editorial, and it's not just trade publishing. I think some of the other graduate programs kind of focus on editing and trade publishing, and we're kind of trying to cover everything. But it's I guess being really agile. As I said, I've been director for almost 6 years. I've like doubled the amount of courses in the program. So one of the most common complaints I get is that there's too many courses and they can't take them all. But we've added things like I couldn't have imagined, for example, maybe 10 years ago, it would have been hard to imagine having a course on audio and podcast publishing, for example. And that's one of the most popular courses now, that you could have a career in audio. And before that was, it was like a sideline, I guess. I mean, I did a little audio like all of my career, really, a little bit, but it was, anyway. So things like that, being agile and adding new courses. One of my newest courses that I teach is publishing entrepreneurship, that people get to like develop their own business idea. And some people use it, like one person actually working in STM publishing, she used that course to generate a business plan for a new journal that she could pitch her publisher. So that's pretty cool, I think.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm kind of curious from everybody else, how are you all kind of responding to some of these emerging trends around OA or generative AI or some of these big things that we kind of, read about in Scholarly Kitchen or in some of the other publications? Are there ways that your organization or you're kind of thinking about how you're going to manage these and how they may reposition perhaps your career?
So I think with, AI, I think it's undoubtedly going to change publishing, in terms of, what we're looking at, what people are submitting, and how we kind of do business at this point. So I mean, with Elsevier, I know even with us, we're developing new tools. I mean, we have, our data analytics team with various platforms are incorporating AI into it. So I think it's more of just we're also watching to see what everything is doing, right? We're taking that cautionary step of let's just see how this goes and how this plays out. The only thing we've taken a certain stance on certain things like, creativity. It's, we want to make sure that we, foster it, but at the same time, we don't impede on it. And that's the thing that we're really worried about is that, AI cannot be an author on a book or a journal article or something. So we've taken that stance. And I think a lot of other, organizations, companies, and institutions have taken that stance as well. But we're always, cautious. We also want to keep an open mind to it. There are so many capabilities that AI can help with us, with our work, with, even just my daily work, right? Looking at using AI to just help me with discovering different trends as well. You're looking at that and just playing around with it and seeing what it can provide. So while we're optimistic, we also are cautious about how that's going to affect publishing in general.
Yeah, I agree with Jocelyn. I think that's where University of Toronto Press is also at, looking at ways AI could maybe assist in some of the more manual labor intensive parts of the job, especially in my role, like with the ebook distribution, looking at digitizing backlists perhaps, or like Toronto has been around since 1901. There's some really old books that we've published, and some of them are just not available right now. So it'd be great to get them out there and see if AI can help with that. At the same time, we want to be cautious about moving forward with projects, making sure, like Jocelyn said, like authors are authors, they're people, they put their time and effort into these books, their research, they really care about it, and we want to make sure that we're protecting their interests in our uh, publishing as well.
Yeah, I think that there's similarly at TNF, we have this cautious optimism around AI where we think we see it as a really useful tool that can help enhance a lot of the work that our authors do, but we want to make sure that their work is protected in a way that they understand when something is put into a generative AI tool, what those ramifications may or may not be, and making sure that they're aware of what that might look like. And so we have a lot of the similar stances around AI can't be an author due to it can't do a licensing agreement, or it lacks some of those capabilities to actually to handle those things at this point. And we're kind of all building the plane mid-flight here because there's still not a lot of government regulations around it. And so we're still trying to figure out how do we nuance this in a way to make sure that we can still utilize this amazing technology, but in a way that's, responsible and ethical to our community.
Yeah, I'll just add a note. I agree with everything said. I think on the individual level, for example, for people that are joining us today as attendees, my advice is to play around with some of the tools, get to know them. It's not really a question of being like for AI or against AI, but knowing what might be useful, what's not. There's this thing of hallucinations. Like I did it was a little while ago, but I had a prompt and I asked it to get more and more detailed about it, and I was just kind of playing around, but I asked it to get more and more detail, and it made up a bunch of citations, and they were like real-ish. It was like things like Publishers Weekly and Publishing Perspectives and Publishing Research Quarterly, but they were like fake articles, and I even like just kind of jumble stuff up. So So, but there's good uses of it. So I give my students, I think the list now is like 20 different tools I encourage them to check out. And so just know what's out there. It's not just Chat GPT, that's for sure. There's a lot of different ones to play around with.
A very cool time to be in this space. You're kind of coming on the precipice of this, massive change. So it's a really cool time to take advantage of exploring it and figuring out too, like what is to come, because there are certain things that I'm sure in 5 years we'll be doing that we hadn't even thought about. So it's a really cool time to kind of be at this, cutting edge spot for a lot of folks. So yeah, taking advantage of that where you can makes a ton of sense. I'm kind of curious from folks, what based on kind of like your individual roles, what skills would you consider to be like the most essential within publishing?
Well, let me start with that one. I think this is something I've been actually doing a lot of research on with other people, Charles Watkinson, Jackie Lord, Kate Heaney, and others. We've been working on actually analyzing this, and we'll be speaking on it at SSP. But there's also the SSP skills map, and one of the things that we've been looking at is how certain skills are applicable to many different roles. For example, marketing and editorial, you see a lot of overlap in the skills that are required. So I would recommend people look at that. Like I said, right now there's an SSP skills map that's available. We're going to be coming out with this dashboard on career progression. It's almost done, where you can see, like, if I'm entry level, what do I need? What skills do I need to be in that same role at a higher level? Or if I'm in marketing, what skills do I need to be over in editorial? So that's an interesting project talking about skills. I'll let the others talk.
Think with my role, I think we talked about a couple of skills, just, kind of the basic skills of being agile and, but I think because you're also a project manager, right? You have tons of books and tons of projects in different realms. And so that is one of them that kind of really helped with my career path, is just able to project manage a lot of these different projects in different, areas or different timelines. The other thing is, editorial and marketing, of course, but that is a core thing about my job. I don't do a lot of editing per se, like copy editing and looking at, but I am looking at the overall portfolio, making sure that we build a strategy and it matches that strategy every year. So every year we're doing a strat plan for each of the portfolios to ensure that we're, analyzing the trends, going through what others, what our conversations had, I had with other authors and researchers in the field, looking at gaps and, and analyzing that. So that's a lot of our work too. Really just a lot of socializing, right? I'm networking and talking to authors and researchers, building that network with my portfolio. And that is I think a big key thing that a lot of people don't realize is that in order to build that, portfolio up, you have to know the key players. You have to get your word out there, your name out there. And so I'm constantly meeting with every researcher I can, and clinician out there in my portfolio, even talking to other side, different societies and whatnot. So it's a lot of that as well in sales, right? Because you have a product. At the end of the day, you have a product to sell. And that product is, my portfolio, and I have to be able to sell that portfolio out. So that's another part that I feel is still part of my skill set in terms of the career. And I don't know, I'm like soft skills, right? Soft skills of organization and presentations and talking to authors, like I've said. Yeah, I think that's a good part of the skill set that I think people who are entering this field should have.
Yeah, I think I would add for my job again, because it's a little less social driven and it's more internal. Obviously, you want to still have those soft skills because you're going to be dealing with if not outside customers, which I do still sometimes when I deal with royalty support and our authors, I'm also, dealing with my coworkers. You want to have a nice working environment. You want to be able to give people information they need and get information from them. Also, just learning to prioritize is a great skill to have. Some jobs take precedent, some jobs need more detail, more attention, and knowing where to put your focus is always a good skill to have. I think also just organization. We all deal with a lot of projects. I mean, Jocelyn mentioned like 100 projects in her portfolio. She needs to know where the stuff for that is. In my job, I'm assigning ISBNs. I need to know what books they're going with, where the budgets are kept, keeping files updated, the contracts, where are they? Have they been processed? Like just keeping everything in order, but also seeing like what needs to take precedence certain times and just being flexible about your time. Certain things come up and they bump other things out of the way, and learning to not really stress about that and go to your coworkers for support. No one in publishing is an island, even me. So yeah, I think those are some good skills to have.
Do you have any recommendations, Jessica, on things that you use to prioritize, or ways that you kind of think about that, or even tools that you
Yeah,
recommend?
I mean, I like lists. I do try to make myself a task list, and then as new tasks come, add them as I finish them, cross them off. I also have a tracking spreadsheet of all the projects that I've handled because I'm tracking the book through like from I'm assigning an ISBN to when the book is released because I also send our author freeze out. So we want to make sure our authors are getting their copies of their book. Authors are always very excited to see their book in person, and you want to get to them as soon as possible. So just like having things broken down into manageable stages, if it's a multi-stage thing, and be like, okay, this has to happen at this time, and just yeah, I'm a big fan of lists. But also, yeah, just not sweating when things aren't urgent, like not feeling like, oh, I just got this task, I need to do it by the end of the day. If it's a task that, you have 2 weeks to do. If something else comes up, it's like, no, God, now I have this task and this task. It's like, okay, that task can be tomorrow. I need to do this one. And I think just, working your way through it that way. I have like a agenda. I write my tasks in, so I also go through the weeks and I have my meetings in, so I know, you know, can't do this task this time. I'm in this meeting, but maybe right after the meeting I'll be doing it. So yeah, just something to keep you organized depending on how your brain works. If you're a calendar person, list person, maybe you're a phone notification person. Like I think just using the tools you have at hand to what actually works with your brain to keep you on task, and so you don't drop tasks either because you never want to forget something, and then 2 weeks later your boss is like, where is that thing, and you're like, I forgot. So yeah.
I'm curious from the panelists, aside from kind of your publishing program, and were there other avenues that you ever decided to explore that led you to like an internship or a bridge job or anything that kind of like really was that aha moment where you're like, oh, this is where I want to be, or maybe I went down this career path and this is somewhere I didn't want to be. And actually, I'll even start this one because this is coming from a non-publishing background. I didn't have publishing on my radar in any way, shape, or form. I kind of take my tools as a policy and government affairs person, and I kind of bring those to different areas. And I thought when I first got this role that it would be very narrow. I'd like work on one line of federal funding. I'd work with one committee. It'd be very, very like straightforward. And it is so broad and so winding, and it touches so many parts of government, and it touches so many aspects of science that I couldn't even have, comprehended it. And I'm still learning, a little over 2 years into my career of everything that we do and all the processes that are going into this. So it's been you know, I don't know if I have a specific job that's taught me this, but I will say that getting into this space and, understanding that there are so many ways that you can kind of connect into it and plug in and take whatever skills you've used elsewhere to, bring to that role. It is a really cool industry to be a part of because you can kind of come with various tools in your toolkit and kind of, you know, immediately offer something special to an organization, which is a really cool thing.
Well, maybe I could take this question in a little bit different direction, possibly. one thing I would encourage people here to do is explore new areas that might be outside your direct job, like volunteer for a project that might be outside your wheelhouse or outside your department. Get involved in a committee at STM or SSP or someplace else like that. In my case, one thing I did, this was quite a number of years ago, but I was working in marketing and ebook development at the RAND Corporation, and I was one of the first people to start doing ebooks, and I was very interested in like the future of ebooks. So I decided just for fun to write an article about it, and it got published and it won an award, and that led to speaking engagements and led to all kinds of things that I would not have expected. And there was no reason for me to write an article. I wasn't a researcher. And in fact, my boss was a little bit suspicious about me doing that because it was not really part of my job, but I did it anyway. And so doing things like that, speak at a conference. One of my students, Jay Soglo, I'll give him a shout out, even though he's not here. He organized a panel at the AU Presses conference last year on accessibility, and it had 500 attendees at it. So, that again, it wasn't really like part of his job either, but he did it for fun, and that he learned a lot through that. So I encourage everybody to try doing something new. Write an article. We've got a Journal of Ethics in Publishing. You could submit an article to us or to Publishing Research Quarterly or Learned Publishing or something like that. So that's a good start.
I mean, John brings up a lot of cool tools because I think, I kind of fell into it. I mean, I wrote editorials back, my college days, but they were about home and design, right? They were nothing on academic or research or anything like that. It was for a periodical in Southern California. So it wasn't anything close to this. I think it was great because I just kind of fell into it. I enjoyed working with a chair closely with her book, really learned the ins and outs on her side, right? On the opposite side of what the customer feels and what the author feels about writing and editing a book. And so it was really great to kind of get her side and then also start working closely. And that's how I built a connection with the acquisitions editor who was part of, acquiring her book for Elsevier. So I think it was great to have that connection. And then we just, because we were corresponding every day and I would ask her questions. So it kind of goes back to some of the other questions that you had. But, I think it's, going through what John said, like actually, subscribing to some of those journals and really learning what tools that they're using. I've read a couple of the articles. I do have a kind of, have that going, and it's really nice to kind of see what other people are doing that are in the same career path and how they got in and what topics they're talking about, because we all work in different realms. I mean, Jessica works in, back in the behind the scenes, but then you have other people doing other things in academic publishing that are quite fascinating, besides we're, going towards not just ebooks, but how are marketing trends, how are sales doing, what topics, how do we deal with AI? So there's a lot of different topics that I think are quite interesting. And those journals and those periodicals or publications are really going to help you understand the field a little bit easier.
Yeah, I agree with Jocelyn. I also think another thing sort of to tie Jocelyn's and John's stuff together is like to keep in mind that you don't need to have like a straight, like even my path, as much publishing or bust as it wasn't so straightforward. Like I entered like my publishing program thinking I want to be an editor. Like I do want to edit actual books. Obviously my job is not at all editing. I think just taking opportunities as they come up and know that publishing has a lot of like sideways motion. We have an acquisitions editor at UTP who was on the sales team. We've had movement there. We also have different departments. So we do distribution. We do the retail for the University of Toronto. we have an IT and HR teams. Like there are other jobs in publishing, but just because you go for those jobs doesn't mean you can't move over. Like maybe you want to take a stab at HR. Maybe you decide, okay, maybe now that I'm in this press, I like the way the sales team runs and I want to apply for an opening that comes up there. I think it's just, yeah, like John said, trying out some things, like even if it's not outside publishing things, trying to get in, like even inside, try things. For me, my job when I started, I wasn't doing any ebook distribution. Our ebook person retired and they were like, hey, you're close enough with the metadata system. Do you want to try to take on this role? I said, sure. If I hated it, we would figure something out. But I actually quite enjoy it. And I think just being open to those opportunities as they come up, even if it's not exactly what you like pictured for yourself, even now, you might find something you didn't know that you actually enjoyed. And there's lots of opportunities within publishing, outside of publishing. You can always find things that you enjoy.
I think you bring up a lot of good points there, Jessica. One thing I encourage my students is be strategic about careers, but also be open to serendipity. There is a lot of serendipity in life and in careers, but I think one thing is to also have goals, like write down your goals if you want to do a certain thing, write them down, be strategic. We talked earlier about prioritization, and I encourage people to do that about careers. Put down things like, like I said, speak at a conference, write an article. When you write down goals and you set a date on them, it makes them more likely that they're going to come true. So think of your career as a kind of strategic plan, like you would have for a company. You'd have a strategic plan. That make a strategic plan for yourself, I think, is a good task.
I also want to jump in on that one with John. I mean, I think also, even though you're interested in like podcasting or editorial, it doesn't mean that it doesn't go by the wayside, right? You could still incorporate that into your job. I mean, I have a podcast, but it has nothing to do with publishing. It's on, patient advocacy, but somehow then my company got wind of it. It was like, hey, why don't you host a couple of episodes for us? So you still can incorporate things that you wanted to do. Editing, there's still opportunities. So it's not just if you go into this career, that's it. You don't, all your creative or all of your other skills, are not used. You can utilize them in different ways. You just kind of have to be take more initiative to do that. And I think it's great to be able to be that open and flexible.
That's awesome. Great advice from everybody. So we've got about 12 minutes to go. So I thought we should open it up a little bit to the audience for questions that they may have with our remaining time. So if anybody has any burning questions, feel free to turn on your camera if you'd like, and let the panel know what you want to know, or ask them whatever question you'd like.
People are always afraid to be first.
Well, I had one other one I wanted to ask. So, and you can also ask the question in the chat too. While we wait, I will throw up the question. What is the best or worst career advice you've received? And then
I don't know about worse, but I think best is to just ask questions. Like, if you're uncertain, there's no advantage to bluffing your way through being uncertain in your job. Ask questions, be curious. Don't close yourself off from people because you want to look like, oh, you're the most professional, great at your job person room. Like everyone asks questions, especially if it's about like a part of the uh, company that you're not in. If you need clarification, I that's always been to me like the driving force is like just be open to other people's ideas and yeah, ask questions.
looks like we do have an audience question. So, Camila, feel free to jump in. Or, oh, maybe not. Does anybody have a question? Otherwise, I will ask. Let me check the chat here. Oh, we do have one in the chat. Two questions. Is there any specific AI tools that you utilize or foresee that will be utilized in your current roles?
I mean, I could go with that. I've explored quite a few. I would say a lot of them are not quite completely developed in my opinion, but they're evolving rapidly. I think the main thing is to play around with them. I can give you one concrete example of something I used that I thought was very useful. Last November, I was presenting at the Guadalajara International Book Fair, and usually, so I present in Spanish because I'm fluent in Spanish and Portuguese, and usually I would make my slides and then translate them like bit by bit, slide by slide, word by word, translate it myself. And I developed a slide. It was kind of a little bit last minute, not totally, but I put the whole slides into a program called DeepL, which is a kind of like Google Translate on steroids, I guess. And it translated all the slides in like a couple minutes. And I still had to go through and check each one. And, I have to say it was my voice because I wrote it originally. So it wasn't translating something else. It was translating me. But I, went in and finessed it all. But that process, it also, I had it translate a bunch of Excel tools that I was using for that presentation to give to attendees. And so it translated like Excel spreadsheets, and that saved me probably 20 hours of work, that process, and I would say it wasn't perfect, but it was maybe 95% correct. So that was a good experience. You can check that one out. It's called DeepL.
Looks like everybody's getting excited in the chat here. I'm going to jump to our next question. What job titles would be good to search for? I'm looking for managing editor, acquisitions, editorial assistant, marketing assistant, publicity assistant, production editor, etc. Are there any specific keywords that I might be missing?
Well, so on that, I would say, I would avoid sort of general job sites like Indeed and Monster. I mean, maybe you go on them now and then, but what I think is a good idea, Haley, is make a list of companies that you're interested in and check their job boards regularly, every week, even every couple of days, and then go to industry specific job boards like STM's job board, SSP's job board, AU Presses, and look at a lot of jobs. Think of it kind of like house hunting. You go to a lot of open houses, even if it's not a house that you might buy. So look at a lot of different job descriptions, and you're right. The keywords and the titles, they do vary, not only throughout the industry, but from company to company. So you have to look at a lot. I think it's spending time. It's quality and quantity. If you're looking for a job, apply to a lot of jobs, and jobs that are that you're capable of, and write a list. When you're looking at job announcements, write a list of what those keywords are, not just the job title, but I think even more important, the skills that they're after.
Also just follow people on LinkedIn, right? I mean, a lot of us post what jobs are available in our company if we come across of it, or it's like within our department or our team. So if you kind of follow some of the key players in LinkedIn, and if there's some people you can network with, they will post as well. I know a number of us will post in LinkedIn, there's a new job opening, there's this. So that might be another option as well to get more specific jobs and requirements for that.
Yeah, just to echo what John said, in Canada we have it's called Quill Inquire, and they have a job board that all the publishing jobs are on. Yeah, just looking there, looking at companies, because I think you do want more company specific or even task specific. Because again, my title is publishing assistant, but my job is so much different probably than a publishing assistant at say like HarperCollins. You know, you're gonna find different tasks nestled under the same like entry level titles kind of thing. So not only looking at industry specific job postings and jobs, but like what are the tasks that these jobs are actually looking for, no matter what the title is, and where do your skills fall within those tasks.
Do you have a question here on career development programs? Are there any that you would advise taking? We mentioned a little bit about audio podcasting, but are there any others such as change management or anything else that you'd recommend?
Well, we have a lot of webinars in our program, like whether you're a student or not. I just invited everybody to one we're doing tomorrow on freelance editing. We've done them on government publishing, on, acquisitions, all kinds. So besides our program, there's webinars STM does, SSP does, AU Presses does. Many of them are free, not all of them. Ours are always free, but a lot of the, like this one was free. There's a lot of them that are free. So go to those and, and then as we were talking about earlier, like read things. You can learn a lot. Read Publishers Week, Publishers Research Quarterly. Read our Journal of Ethics in Publishing. Read the Scholarly Kitchen blog. That's a good way to develop new skills. And then, as I said before, like volunteer on something, even, maybe it's not in your company, volunteer on a committee or something like that.
Could you talk a bit more about writing articles as a way to get more involved in publishing? We've mentioned that a little bit here today. Are there particular ways that you suggest getting started with this? Finding a topic, suggested places to submit, etc. Any tips or tricks on that?
Well, find a topic that resonates with you. And I think it's always useful if it's not necessarily always required, but it's certainly useful if you could do some kind of original research, maybe do a survey, interview some people. There are a lot of different techniques. In fact, one class I'm going to start developing from my program is actually research methods on that. But one technique I've used that in the past was kind of a sort of case study approach. For example, that first article I mentioned, I sort of analyzed ebook development and used 3 different cases and compared those. So that's one thing to do. Interview somebody that's doing something cool and write about that. There's a lot of things you could do.
Awesome. Well, I think we are just coming up on time here, and I see one of the last questions being answered in the chat around advice about different routes if you don't have a background in science. So feel free to check out the chat for that if you want to know more about it. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap up here, and I just wanted to thank our panelists today for joining us. John, I know you wanted to pitch something, so I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you a shot to pitch it real fast.
Oh, I put it in the chat earlier, but like I said, we do a career webinar on more or less a monthly basis. They're always free, and we have one tomorrow on freelance editing, which can be a full-time career, but as I said, it could be a side hustle for a lot of people. Even if you're, let's say, like Jessica working in metadata and ebooks, but you like editing, you could do that on the side. So that's coming up tomorrow. I put that in the chat. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to everybody for attending. We really appreciate it. Please feel free to reach out to us for additional questions. Take advantage of the networking aspects of this. And thank you all so much. And we will be sending around a recording as well. But thank you all very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.